My name is Emily Carver, and I used to think being the good daughter would protect me. But last spring, everything I believed about love, fairness, and family shattered in one quiet, sunny afternoon. I caught my younger sister, Chloe, stealing, and somehow I was the one punished. Locked alone in a basement while my parents stood by her, I realized the terrifying truth. I was not their daughter, just their scapegoat. If you've ever been gaslit by your own family, you'll feel this. Before we dive in, where are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments. I'd love to know where this story is reaching. It was one of those deceptive spring afternoons in Omaha, warm sunlight draping over our modest home like a gentle lie. The kind of day when everything looks safe, even when it is. I was home from college for the weekend, sorting through a box of childhood keepsakes in the living room when I heard the zipper. That sharp, unmistakable sound. I looked up to see Chloe, 15, all eyeliner and attitude, kneeling by Mom's jewelry cabinet. Her school backpack was gaping open beside her. "Chloe, what are you doing?" My voice cracked, not with accusation, but disbelief. She froze, hand hovering over a velvet pouch. "Just borrowing something for tonight," she said, too casual. "Don't freak out." Borrowing? She was pocketing our mother's gold bracelet, the one Grandpa gave Mom on her wedding day. I stood slowly, heart pounding. "You can't just take that, you need to put it back." Chloe's smirk was razor sharp. "Like you've never done anything sneaky." I didn't flinch. "I'm telling them." And I did. I walked straight to the kitchen where Mom was chopping onions and Dad was fiddling with the thermostat. I just caught Chloe stealing from the jewelry cabinet. What happened next should have been simple, honest. But the moment the words left my mouth, everything twisted. Mom turned, eyes narrowing. "You're accusing your sister." "She had your bracelet in her hand. She was putting it in her backpack." Chloe stood in the doorway, eyes wide and trembling, Oscar-worthy. "I wasn't stealing, Mom. I was going to ask. Emily just freaked out on me again." Dad's voice was low, tight with anger. "You come home from college and immediately start stirring up drama." I was stunned. "I'm not. This isn't Dad. She—" "Enough," Mom shouted. "You're always trying to make Chloe look bad. You hate that we're close now." "What? You think you're so perfect with your scholarships and your 'I'm better than this house' attitude." Her eyes were glassy with rage. "But you're not." That's when they said it. "You need to reflect on your behavior." I thought it was a figure of speech, until Dad grabbed my wrist and marched me toward the basement door. "No, wait, what are you doing? You can't." The door slammed. The lock clicked. Darkness, cold concrete, silence. For the first few minutes, I thought they'd come back, that this was some sick scare tactic. But hours passed. The evening light vanished from the narrow glass window. And still, nothing. I curled up on the old couch, legs tucked to my chest, trying to understand what had just happened. How did telling the truth make me the enemy? I whispered my own name in the dark. "Emily, you're okay. You didn't do anything wrong." But the words felt like lies, because not one person had believed me. That night, in the basement's freezing silence, something in me shifted. I stopped waiting for the door to open. I stopped hoping they'd say sorry. That's when I realized no one was coming to save me. The morning after, the sun felt cruel, too bright, too normal. I emerged from the basement with stiff limbs and an ache behind my eyes so deep it felt permanent. No one spoke as I walked into the kitchen. My mother stirred her coffee like it hadn't happened. My father read the paper. Chloe had vanished like smoke after a fire. I didn't ask for an apology. I didn't expect one. I just left. No goodbye, no thanks for letting me stay. I walked to the bus stop with nothing but my tote bag and a raw, pulsing silence inside me. My sweatshirt still smelled faintly of mildew from the couch. Back at campus, everything looked the same, but I crossed the quad with that same strange sensation I had in the basement, the knowledge that I was truly alone. That knowledge used to scare me. Now it hardened into something else, something cold but useful. No one was going to protect me, so I had to protect myself. My roommate, Kendra, looked up from her desk when I entered. "Whoa, are you okay?" I forced a nod. "Just tired." I didn't tell her. I didn't tell anyone, because even if I did, who would believe me? What would I say? My sister steals and my parents punish me for noticing. It sounded ridiculous, unprovable, so I buried it. I threw myself into schoolwork. 4 papers due, 2 midterms on the horizon, and a student aid renewal deadline that loomed like a guillotine. I wasn't going to give my parents another excuse to say I was ungrateful. I'd fund my own life. Fully. By the end of that week, I had taken on another campus job, this time shelving books in the library basement. The irony wasn't lost on me. Down there, among dust and silence, I found something strange and comforting. Order. Books went where they were supposed to. Numbers lined up. Rules existed and were followed. I started keeping my schedule obsessively neat. 6 a.m. run, 8 a.m. stats class, 11 a.m. work shift, 4 p.m. library desk hours. Repeat. My life became a machine with no room for weakness. I didn't call home. They didn't call me. But sometimes, late at night, I'd scroll through old texts from my mom. Those short, good luck messages from high school recitals or the silly bitmojis she used to send me on finals week. I'd read them like archaeological artifacts, trying to decipher who she had been and whether that woman had ever truly seen me. My dorm room became my sanctuary. I moved my bed near the window so I could see the sky first thing each morning. I pinned quiet mantras on the corkboard. You're not crazy. You're just not their favorite. You are still real. There were moments, brief and terrifying, when I doubt my own memory. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe I exaggerated. But then I'd remember the door, the lock, the darkness, and the sound of my mother's voice, cold as a cracked plate. You're always trying to make Chloe look bad. That voice didn't lie. It left scars. Every time I thought about going home for a visit, my stomach clenched. So I didn't. I spent my weekends tutoring and eating sad vending machine dinners. I stopped checking Chloe's social media. I unfollowed my parents' Facebook accounts. The longer I stayed away, the clearer I saw it. The version of me they believed in wasn't a person. She was a shadow, someone to blame, a sponge for guilt, and I was done being that. One day after class, I sat under the old elm by the science building and finally did something radical. I deleted our family group chat. Just gone. It wasn't a loud moment. No drama, no tears, but it felt like pulling a splinter from skin that had grown around it. I wasn't healed. Not yet. Maybe not ever, but I was surviving. And sometimes, that's enough to begin. I didn't invite my family. I couldn't stomach the idea of their polite clapping while pretending they'd ever supported me. So when my name was called and I crossed the stage in that stiff navy robe, I looked out into a sea of strangers and smiled anyway. It was my moment. Mine alone. 3 weeks later, I packed everything I owned into a beat-up sedan I'd bought for $800 cash. The passenger window didn't roll down, and the stereo made a strange clicking noise every time I hit a bump, but it moved forward. That was all I needed. I took a job in Des Moines, data entry at a sleepy little insurance firm where no one asked too many questions. The pay was terrible. The cubicles smelled like dust and instant noodles, and the coffee machine was permanently broken. But it was mine. A real paycheck. A real start. I rented a tiny upstairs room in a boarding house run by a kind, retired couple who didn't pry. My kitchen was a hot plate and mini fridge, and my view was a brick wall, but I slept soundly for the first time in years. I got in early, stayed late, entered names into spreadsheets, matched claim codes, filed forms in strict alphabetical order. It was dull work, but I found something strangely satisfying in its simplicity. You do the task, you get paid. No gaslighting, no shifting truths. I lived off oatmeal, rice, and cans of soup. No new clothes, no streaming services. Every dollar I didn't need went into an old Nike shoebox under my bed, my freedom fund. By winter, I'd saved $1,247.83. I counted it every Friday night like it was treasure. In a way, it was. But even freedom has its complications. My parents hadn't called in months, not even after graduation. And I hadn't reached out either. I told myself I didn't care. But then came the message. It was a photo from Chloe, her in a prom dress surrounded by fairy lights. The caption read, "Senior Year Slay Queen." No words, just that. And yet it hooked something deep in my chest. Because even now, after everything, I looked at her and felt. What? Resentment, envy, ache. I hated that I cared. 2 days later, Mom texted. "Hope you're well. Chloe's prom is Saturday. You coming home for it?" As if we hadn't shared silence for an entire year. As if I hadn't been locked in a basement and abandoned. I didn't reply, but the guilt hit anyway. By spring, money got tighter. Rent went up. My boss cut hours. I started skipping meals again, pretending I was on a diet when my stomach growled through the afternoon. Eventually, I gave in and went back, just for a weekend, just to reset. The house hadn't changed. Same dusty beige walls, same ceramic angel by the door. But the air felt heavier. Chloe strutted around in her crown like she owned the place. Mom doted on her. Dad made corny jokes. They barely looked at me. And when they did, it was with that same old smirk like I was back for approval, for scraps of love. I kept my mouth shut, ate dinner, smiled on cue. But that night, alone in my childhood bedroom, I moved the shoebox from under my bed and tucked it into the closet behind a stack of old textbooks. I didn't trust them, but I needed somewhere safer than my rental. At least I thought I did. The next morning, Mom called through the door, syrupy sweet. "Don't be late for breakfast, sweetheart." I lay still, staring at the ceiling fan spin. Everything looked the same. But inside, I knew I was slipping back into a role I never auditioned for. Not the daughter, not the sister, just the convenient disappointment. It was a Thursday evening when I noticed. The kind of ordinary day that numbs you into believing nothing bad could possibly happen. I came home from work, dropped my bag by the closet, and went straight to the stash. The shoebox in my childhood closet, my lifeline, my secret. I counted the bills like I always did. $857.83. That couldn't be right. I counted again. Then a third time. No matter how carefully I separated the crumpled bills, it was still wrong. I was short. Exactly $200. A cold flush swept over me. I sat back on the floor, heartbeat thudding against my ribs. My mind started tracing every possible mistake. Had I miscounted last week? Maybe I used more than I remembered. No, I remembered. I always remembered. My stomach twisted. I stepped out into the hallway where the sound of Chloe's laughter drifted from her room. I knocked. No answer. When I opened the door, she was sprawled across her bed, scrolling her phone with a face mask smeared across her cheeks. "What?" she said, not looking up. "I'm missing some money," I said carefully, "from the shoebox in my closet." She blinked, all wide-eyed innocence. "Why would I take your money? I'm not accusing." "Yes, you are," she snapped, sitting up. "You're basically saying I'm a thief. Chloe, I didn't tell anyone about that money, and you're the only one who's been up here." Her smirk returned, slow and mean. "Maybe you lost it, or maybe you're just paranoid like always. I know how much was in there." She stood and walked past me with that signature eye roll, heading straight to the kitchen. I followed, pulse pounding. Our mother stood at the stove stirring soup. The kitchen smelled like thyme and something overboiled. She turned just as I spoke. "Mom, someone took $200 from the shoebox in my closet. Chloe knew it was there." Chloe gasped dramatically. "Wow. Seriously? Emily," Mom's voice was a warning wrapped in a sigh. "Are we really doing this again? I'm not making it up." She set the ladle down and wiped her hands. "You've always been so possessive. Maybe you misplaced it or spent it and forgot." "No, I didn't." My voice shook with frustration. "I counted it. I write it down. It was $200. "You've been so tense lately," she said, gently condescending. "Working too much. Maybe you're just tired." Tired. That word felt like a slap. I turned to Chloe, who now stood behind her, arms crossed like a queen's guard. "Look at her," I said, unable to stop myself. "She's smirking because she knows I'm right." "That's enough," Mom snapped. "You don't accuse family. That money wasn't even in a bank. Why would you leave it lying around if it was so important?" I stared at her, stunned. She wasn't even pretending to care. That night I sat in my room, back against the door, willing myself not to cry. The betrayal cracked something open. Not just the theft, but the casual cruelty of being dismissed. Again, I had worked so hard for that money. Every penny earned while skipping meals, saying no to coffees with coworkers, dragging myself through 2 shifts a day. And now it was gone, like it never mattered. At work the next day, I was a ghost. I typed wrong entries, forgot login credentials. At lunch, I sat in the break room alone, picking at a vending machine granola bar like it was cardboard. That's when Brittany walked in. She was new, mid-20s with a buzzed haircut and thick-framed glasses, always cheerful, always slightly sarcastic in a way that made everyone laugh without feeling stupid. She sat across from me with a slice of leftover pizza. "You look like someone stole your dog and then ran over your favorite pen." I gave a dry smile. "Rough week." She tilted her head. "Want to talk about it?" "No, thanks." "Cool," she said, popping a bite in her mouth. "I'll just sit here and radiate non-judgmental vibes while you silently unravel." That startled a laugh out of me, just a small one, but it was enough. I didn't tell her everything, just that I was saving for something and the money had disappeared, that I suspected someone close but no one believed me. Brittany's face didn't change, no pity, just listening. "That's awful," she said. "I'm sorry." "Thanks. You want half my pizza." I blinked. "Seriously. Seriously. It's sausage and mushrooms, and my fridge is already full of regret." She pushed the plate toward me. It wasn't much. But in that moment, it was everything. Someone saw me. Someone believed I wasn't crazy. That night I went home and stared at my closet door like it was a monster in the dark, but instead of despair, I felt something small begin to kindle again. A name. A face. Brittany. Maybe I wasn't entirely alone after all. After that night, Brittany became something of a constant. She didn't ask for details, and I didn't offer them, not at first. But during slow afternoons at the office or late evenings in the break room, we developed a rhythm. Her humor softened my edges. Her presence reminded me of something I hadn't felt in years: safety. She started bringing extra food, accidentally packing 2 sandwiches, tossing an extra bottle of juice onto my desk, always pretending it was nothing. But I knew it was everything. "I swear," she joked one evening, "you've turned me into a full-time snack mule." I laughed, really laughed, and she grinned like she was proud of herself. Slowly, pieces of the story slipped out. How I was living at home again, how my parents didn't really see me, how my sister had taken more than money, she had taken trust too. One night, Brittany leaned back in her chair, legs crossed on the table, and said, "You ever think about moving out?" I blinked. "Like, just leaving." "Yeah, you're working. You're saving. Why stay where you're constantly walking on broken glass?" I didn't know how to answer, because the truth was I had thought about it 1,000 times, but the fear always rushed in before the fantasy could fully form. Where would I go? What if I couldn't afford rent? What if I failed? And deeper still, what if they were right about me? What if I was the problem? "I don't know," I said, staring at the linoleum floor. "It's complicated." Brittany nodded. "Yeah, family stuff always is. But complicated doesn't mean permanent." That line stuck with me. Complicated doesn't mean permanent. That week, I started volunteering for extra hours at work. Any shift, any department. I cleaned out filing cabinets, ran errands no one wanted. I told myself it was about the money, and in part it was. But more than that, it gave me an excuse not to go home. The later I worked, the less time I spent dodging Chloe's smug comments and Mom's veiled criticisms. When I did show up, I moved quietly, ate quickly, slept with earbuds in. I started locking my bedroom door. They noticed, of course they did. "Paranoid much?" Chloe sneered one morning. I didn't answer, I just left. The fatigue built slowly, like fog in the brain. I'd catch myself zoning out in meetings, forgetting words mid-sentence. But with every hour I logged and every tip Brittany slid across the table in the form of Craigslist listings or roommate ads, something in me sharpened. A vision, not big, not dramatic, just mine, a tiny studio, a worn couch. Quiet, freedom. The thought scared me, but it also pulsed in my chest like a heartbeat. Late one Friday, Brittany and I sat in the break room while the rain drummed outside. "You're burning out," she said quietly, watching me sip lukewarm coffee. "I know. So why not make a plan?" I looked at her, really looked. Her calm, her quiet certainty, her belief that I could change something just by choosing to. And for the first time, I didn't push that belief away. "I want to move out," I said. She smiled, not surprised, just proud. "There it is," she said. "Step 1, say it out loud." And I did. Again and again in my head as I rode the bus home, as I walked past the living room where my parents watched TV without noticing me, as I slipped into my bedroom and locked the door. I want to move out. I want to start over. I want my life back. It would take time. It would take money. It would take guts I wasn't sure I had. But I was finally letting the dream take up space. And that was more than I'd ever allowed myself before. It was just past 10 when I realized I'd missed the last bus. Rain clung to the streets in greasy streaks, and the stoplight at the corner blinked red like a tired eye. I stood under the flickering awning, hugging my tote bag, the ache in my shoulders heavier than usual. I'd worked a double shift. Again. The rain had started just as I stepped out of the office, slow and cold, soaking into my worn sneakers. I checked the schedule twice, hoping I'd misread the time. Nope. Last bus gone. Next one, 5:12 a.m. I stared down the road. 20 kilometers. That's what stood between me and my bed. 20 kilometers of cracked sidewalk, sketchy intersections, and too many memories waiting in that house I no longer called home. I considered walking. I even took a few steps. But exhaustion dragged at my limbs like sandbags. My coat was thin. My socks were already wet. Then a pair of headlights swung around the corner. A black car, sleek and slow, glided to a stop beside the curb. The driver's window rolled down with a soft whir. "Hey," a voice called out, warm, clear, and casual. "You okay?" I hesitated, instantly alert. A man, mid to late 20s maybe, dark hair, square jaw. His expression wasn't smug or aggressive, it was curious, concerned. "Missed the bus," he guessed, as if this wasn't the first time he'd seen someone stranded in the rain. I nodded but didn't move closer. He held up both hands, palms out, no threat. "Sorry, didn't mean to freak you out. I can drive you somewhere if you want, no pressure." I squinted through the rain. The inside of the car looked clean. No dice on the dashboard. No thumping music. He wore a navy sweatshirt, the sleeves pushed up like he'd just come from studying or maybe reading at a late cafe. "I'm Lucas," he said. "I live just off Prescott." Prescott, that was near campus. Still, every voice in my head screamed no, stranger danger, headlines, all the warnings my mom used to throw at me before she stopped worrying about what happened when I left the house. But something in his tone was disarming, not slick, not rehearsed. He didn't push, just waited. "I live near Metteridge," I said finally, my voice hoarse from the cold. He nodded. "That's like 20 clicks, long walk. And you look exhausted." I glanced down at my soaked shoes. "I get it," he added. "Total stranger, late at night, you have no reason to trust me." His honesty caught me off guard. He leaned over and popped the passenger door. "It's warm, and if you get in and change your mind, I'll pull over anywhere." I hesitated a second longer. My options were few. It was either this or a freezing, miserable walk through poorly lit neighborhoods with blisters waiting. I stepped forward. His brow lifted slightly, but he said nothing as I slid in. The heat hit me first, gentle and immediate. The smell of leather and cinnamon gum. He offered me a towel from the back seat for my lap like this wasn't his first rainy rescue. "Thank you," I said, not meeting his eyes. He nodded and pulled smoothly onto the road. For a few minutes, neither of us spoke. Rain ticked against the windshield in soft staccato. The city slid past, wet pavement glowing under streetlights, shadows blurring into silhouettes. "You work late?" he asked eventually, voice calm. "Data entry," I replied. "Insurance office." "Sounds fun." I gave a tired laugh. "It's a job." He glanced at me. "I bartend a few nights a week, keeps rent paid and dreams on life support." "What's the dream?" He smiled, not cocky, just a little wistful. "Writer, maybe someday." There was something grounding in how he said it. No arrogance. No delusion, just a quiet hope. I found myself wanting to ask more, to know more, but I didn't, not yet. We drove in silence again, and for the first time in a long time, the quiet didn't feel oppressive. It felt safe. "Is this the street?" he asked as we turned into Metteridge. I pointed toward the end. "The beige one with the cracked shutters." He slowed to a gentle stop. "Here okay?" "Yes, this is perfect." I opened the door, still holding the towel. "You can keep that," he said, waving it off. I paused. "Thanks for the ride and for not being creepy." He laughed softly. "I'll add that to my resume." I stood in the rain for a moment, hesitating, but I didn't ask for his number. I didn't say goodbye. I just turned toward the house, heart strangely calm. Inside, the lights were still on. I could already hear Chloe's music echoing down the hall, but for one brief night, something had cracked through the numbness. A stranger. A car. A moment of kindness that didn't ask anything in return, and somehow, that mattered more than I could explain. I barely slept that night. Not because anything happened. Not because of what Lucas did. He was respectful, kind, even funny in a quiet sort of way, but because of how it all felt afterward. Too human, too normal. After so long of feeling invisible, it startled me how easily he saw me. I lay awake staring at the water stains on my ceiling, clutching the towel he'd given me like it was armor. His voice kept echoing, soft, steady. "You have no reason to trust me." He said it like a fact, not a defense. I liked that. The honesty of it. By morning, the towel was folded neatly on my desk, and I was trying not to replay every detail like a schoolgirl with a crush. But I did. I thought about his hands, how he didn't fidget, didn't tap the steering wheel like so many guys do when they're pretending to be calm. I thought about the way he listened, not to respond, but just to understand. I wondered what kind of stories he wrote and if he ever finished them. I wondered if I'd ever see him again. At work, Brittany raised an eyebrow as I yawned my way through a spreadsheet. "You look like you either fell in love or got hit by a bus," she said, sipping her green tea. "Possibly both." I hesitated, debating how much to say. Then I told her, not everything, just the ride, the warmth, his name. She tilted her head. "Lucas, huh?" I shrugged, trying to keep my voice neutral. "He seemed decent. Did you get his number?" "No, Emily," she groaned. "What if he was your future emergency contact and you just let him drive into the mist like a Hallmark ghost?" I smiled, but inside. Yeah, I wondered the same thing. I left work that night feeling a little lighter. Still tired, still low on money, but lighter. The walk home from the bus was quiet, the streets damp with leftover rain. As I turned onto our block, I caught myself glancing down the road, half expecting to see that black car again. I didn't. Still, hope is funny like that. It lingers even when logic says not to. I stepped through the front door, boots squeaking slightly. The smell of reheated pasta hit me like a wall. Chloe's voice followed immediately. "Oh look, the martyr returns." She was in the kitchen, leaning against the fridge, twirling a spoon like it was a microphone. "You working late again?" she asked, mock innocent. "Yeah. Hope it's enough to replace that missing money," she added with air quotes. I froze. My mother didn't even look up from her crossword. Chloe smirked. "Unless you lost more." I said nothing. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction. "You know," she went on, "you'd probably lose your head if it wasn't screwed on." "That's enough, Chloe," I said quietly, moving past her toward the stairs. "Whatever," she muttered. "So sensitive." The words didn't hurt the way they used to, not quite, but they chipped away, each time, like termites in the bones of a house you haven't yet escaped. In my room, I closed the door, sat on the bed, and let out a slow breath. It should have ruined the night. Her voice, her smugness, the way our mother didn't even blink, that should have unraveled me, but it didn't. Because somewhere in my chest, Lucas's voice still lived. "You look exhausted." He didn't say it like a criticism. He said it like a lifeline. Someone saw me, someone noticed. I picked up the towel from the desk, still faintly smelling of cinnamon and warm leather. I pressed it to my face and whispered, "Please let me see him again." Not for a fairy tale, not for rescue, just for the reminder that kindness existed. That connection wasn't a fantasy, that maybe. I didn't have to be alone forever. He came back the next night. I didn't expect it, wasn't even sure I'd hoped hard enough for it. But there he was, parked half a block down under the broken streetlight, window rolled down like it was nothing unusual. "You again," I said, approaching slowly, the corners of my mouth tugging into something shy and unfamiliar. Lucas smiled. "You looked like you could use a ride. Again." I hesitated just long enough to remember all the reasons I shouldn't. Then I got in. It became a routine after that. Not every night, not predictable, but enough. He'd show up, quiet and calm, and we'd drive aimlessly through the streets, talking about everything and nothing. Sometimes we'd stop for gas station coffee. Once we sat in a deserted park and watched the lights of airplanes blink across the sky. Another time, we parked by the river and just listened to the water rush past. Lucas never pushed. He never asked why I was always tired or why my voice cracked when I mentioned home. But he noticed. I could feel it in the way he adjusted the heater just right, in how he paused the conversation if I went silent too long. I told him little things at first, like how I used to collect postcards as a kid, or how I'd once memorized all the state capitals just to feel good at something no one cared about. He told me he was raised by his older sister after their mom left, that he'd bounced through half a dozen jobs before realizing he didn't want to climb any corporate ladder. He just wanted space to write. One night, parked outside an old library, he turned to me and said, "You ever notice how people survive things they never talk about?" I didn't answer. I just stared at my hands. That was the night I let myself tell him about the basement. Not everything, just enough. He didn't flinch, didn't try to fix it. He just said, "No one should ever make you feel small in your own home." And that sentence did something to me. It wasn't loud. It wasn't a declaration. But it was the first time someone had acknowledged that what happened wasn't just family drama. It was wrong. By then, I'd stopped asking myself why he kept showing up. He just did. And that mattered more than any explanation. We weren't dating, not officially. But there was a closeness that pressed softly at the edges of something more. It lived in the way he handed me his hoodie when I shivered. In the way I started looking at the clock every evening, wondering if tonight was one of the nights he'd come. Then one night he didn't. I waited by the window longer than I should have. When the streets stayed empty, I finally walked home alone. The house was quiet. Too quiet. My parents' car was gone. Chloe's music wasn't playing. I climbed the stairs slowly, fatigue dragging at my heels. All I wanted was to crawl into bed and dream of a life that felt more mine than this one ever had. But the moment I opened my bedroom door, I knew. My shoebox was on the floor, spilled open. The bills I had left were crumpled and torn. My dresser drawers were half open. My desk had been rifled through. My small row of books was knocked over like a child had played recklessly in my absence. My throat tightened. I stepped into the room, heart thudding. Not a robbery. There was no broken window. No sign of forced entry. This wasn't random. It was a message. I kneeled and picked up one of the bills, now smudged with something oily. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat on the floor, surrounded by my things, violated and disrespected yet again. Someone had been in here. Someone who knew I'd been hiding something. Someone who wanted me to know they could reach me even when I wasn't looking. And I knew exactly who. But I couldn't accuse them. Not anymore. Not after last time. Not after being called jealous, unstable, paranoid. The cost of speaking up had always been higher than I could afford. So instead, I picked up the books, smoothed the crumpled cash, straightened the picture frame of me at graduation, the one no one in this house had ever commented on. Then I locked my door, sat on the edge of the bed, and whispered to no one, "I have to get out." The difference now, this time I meant it. This time the rage was cold, steady. This time I wouldn't ask for understanding. I wouldn't beg to be seen. I would leave. I would rebuild. And I wouldn't wait for permission. I stopped going home on weekends. At first, I told myself it was temporary, just until things settled down, just until I had more energy. But the truth was, I couldn't walk through that front door anymore without feeling like I was walking into a trap. So I didn't. I started keeping a small overnight bag in my locker at work. Extra clothes, toothpaste, my charger, a paperback novel I never actually read. When Brittany asked where I was staying, I just shrugged. Figuring it out. But I knew exactly where I was going. Lucas's car, his voice, his silence, him. He didn't ask for explanations when I started texting more. Didn't blink when I showed up outside the library at midnight once, too wired to go anywhere else. He just opened the door and made room. The first time I stayed at his place, it was accidental. We'd driven out past the city, talking about childhood fears and favorite smells and what we'd name a stray cat if we found one. Somewhere between the soft hum of the engine and the sound of his voice, I dozed off. When I woke up, we were parked in front of a small building tucked behind a diner. "Did I fall asleep?" I mumbled, disoriented. "You did," he said, smiling. "Didn't want to wake you. Where are we?" "My place." I blinked. "Wait, what?" He held up his hands. "You can stay in the car, or I can make tea, totally up to you." Something about the way he said it, that utter lack of pressure, made my decision easy. His apartment was small, lived in, warm, books everywhere. The couch sagged slightly in the middle and the walls were covered in sketches and post-it notes scribbled with plot ideas. He handed me a hoodie and a pair of socks. "You looked cold." I sat on the couch, tea steaming in my hands, trying not to feel like I was floating away. "You okay?" he asked gently. I hadn't realized I was shaking. I looked at him, and then I told him everything. Not in a rush, not all at once, but over the next hour I let it pour. How my parents called me jealous when I told the truth. How they locked me in the basement. How Chloe stole from me and smirked like she'd won. How even now my belongings weren't safe in the house I grew up in. I told him about the shoebox, the missing money, the ransacked room. He didn't interrupt, not once. When I finally stopped, wrung dry and half embarrassed, I looked away. "You probably think I'm being dramatic." "No," he said, his voice so soft it made me ache. "I think you've survived a war with people who pretended they loved you." I swallowed hard. "Emily," he said, and it was the way he said my name that broke me a little. "You didn't deserve any of that." I looked up. His eyes held no pity. Just something steady, fierce. "I don't want you to be scared in your own life," he said. "Not ever again." And then, after a long moment, he added, "No one's going to hurt you, not while I'm here." That was the night I kissed him. It wasn't a grand movie kiss, all swooping music and dipped waists. It was quiet, slow, like breathing after holding your breath for too long. It felt like choosing safety for the first time. We didn't call it love, not right away. But it lived in the things we didn't say. In the way he'd bring me coffee before my shift. In how I started keeping a toothbrush at his place. In how he always texted, "You okay?" if he hadn't heard from me by sunset. Brittany noticed, of course. "You're glowing," she teased one morning as we sorted files. "Did you eat a boy for breakfast?" "Just seeing someone," I admitted. "Whoever he is, keep him or at least clone him." I smiled but didn't say more. Some things I wanted to keep just for myself, at least for now. My parents didn't ask where I was anymore. Chloe occasionally sent photos with captions like "family dinner without the drama" or "mom says hi, LOL. I never responded. I had stopped waiting for an apology or a change. Instead, I was building something else. A life that made sense. A future I could look forward to. and a love I hadn't believed was possible for someone like me. It was a Sunday morning, the kind where the light comes in soft and forgiving, and for once I let myself believe I deserved the calm. Lucas and I were sitting on the floor of his apartment, eating cereal out of mismatched bowls and listening to some indie playlist that sounded like old summer dreams. His leg brushed mine, not by accident, not for the first time. "I've been thinking," he said, not looking at me. I froze mid-spoonful. That phrase always made me brace for impact. "Dangerous," I replied, trying to keep the mood light. He chuckled, then met my eyes. "I want to meet them." The spoon paused midair. "Who?" "Your family." I blinked. He set his bowl down gently. "I don't mean in some formal ask permission to court you way. I want them to know I exist, that you're not alone anymore." My pulse thudded in my ears. "They won't care," I said. "Worse, they'll mock you, mock us." "Let them try," he said softly. I looked away. It's not that simple. Didn't argue, just waited. And that silence, the patience in it, was worse than any pressure. "Lucas," I whispered, "they make everything ugly. They take good things and twist them." "I know," he said. "Then why?" "Because if we're serious, they're part of the picture, even if they're just a shadow on the edge of the frame." I stared at him, stomach tight. "Let me show them who's standing beside you now," he said. "Not to start a war, just to end the illusion that they can still tear you down without consequences." My chest ached. I didn't want him in that house. I didn't want us under their microscope. But I also couldn't deny how badly I'd wanted someone, anyone, to finally speak truth in that living room. To say out loud what I never could. I gave a slow, shaky nod. "Okay," I whispered. "Dinner." The plan was set for Friday. Spaghetti night, my mom's passive-aggressive specialty. Lucas offered to bring dessert, and I laughed because they didn't even deserve that. All week I vacillated between dread and detachment. What would they say? Would my dad play the stoic, unimpressed patriarch? Would Chloe flirt just to rattle me? Would my mom make veiled comments about my job or my clothes or my posture? Probably all of the above. I warned Lucas about everything, every ugly detail. He listened without flinching. "I'm not going in there expecting love," he said. "I'm going to protect you." That made me cry. The day of the dinner, I couldn't eat, couldn't sit still. I changed outfits 3 times before finally settling on a navy dress and boots I'd thrifted last year. When we pulled up to the house, my hands were trembling. Lucas took them in his. "We go in. We sit through dinner. And if it gets bad, we leave. Simple." I nodded. We walked up the front steps together. The porch light buzzed overhead, flickering like it always had but never got fixed. My mother opened the door with a smile so forced it could have cracked porcelain. "Well, you must be Lucas," she said, eyes scanning him like he was a potential donor, not a person. Lucas held out the pie box. "Brought dessert." "How thoughtful," she replied, already turning away. Inside, it was exactly as I'd remembered. Stiff dining chairs, oversalted smells, Chloe in full mascara and smugness. Dad sipping beer like he'd been dragged into civility. Dinner began. Small talk clanked against the silence like silverware on chipped plates. My mom asked Lucas what he did for a living, if anything, and Chloe made a joke about Emily's tragic taste in everything. Lucas smiled politely, answered calmly, but I felt the tension winding around my ribs like a tightening cord. When I mentioned work, Dad chuckled. "Still typing names all day for $10 an hour, huh?" Lucas's hand brushed mine under the table. I didn't respond, but the pain, God, the pain of being back in that seat, shrinking again, was almost too much. "They always say charity begins at home," my mom added with a laugh. "And poor Emily's been collecting emotional coupons since birth." Laughter. Even Chloe joined in. Lucas set his fork down slowly. I held my breath. "Not yet, please, not yet, not here, not like this." But then he looked up directly at them, calm, steady, a quiet force that made the air shift. "Do you always talk to her like that?" he asked. Silence. Dead, heavy silence. My father's chair creaked as he turned. "Excuse me." Lucas didn't blink. "Emily, do you always try to tear her down at dinner, or is this just the welcome special?" My heart stopped. Dad's jaw tensed. "You've got some nerve. You've got a problem," Lucas said, voice still cool. "And it's sitting in your seat." I reached for his arm, but my father was already standing. Lucas stood, too. "You think you can come into my house?" and he lunged. It happened fast, a blur. My father's hand lifted, open-palmed and threatening. But Lucas caught it mid-air like he knew it was coming, firmly, not violently, and then pushed it back, not to hurt, just to stop. The silence that followed was the kind that breaks things. Everyone froze. My mom's mouth opened in a wordless gasp. Chloe stared like she'd witnessed a ghost take form. Lucas turned to me, still calm. "You ready?" I nodded, and just like that, we walked out. No screaming, no slamming doors, just power shifting. Finally, we didn't speak until we were halfway down the street. The streetlights flickered overhead, casting long shadows on the pavement. My breath came shallow and fast, like I was still waiting for someone to come running after us, yelling, accusing, dragging me back. But the footsteps never came. Lucas reached across the console and gently took my hand. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded, then shook my head. Then laughed, a short, strange sound that felt like a crack in something I hadn't realized was breaking. "I think I'm free," I whispered. It wasn't joy exactly. It wasn't peace. Not yet. But it was the first clean breath I'd taken in years. That night, Lucas held me like I was something precious, not fragile. I cried harder than I had since the basement. Not because I was hurt, but because I'd made it out. Because someone finally saw the fire under all my silence and didn't try to smother it. A week later, we packed up my things. I didn't tell my parents I was leaving. I didn't leave a note. Just boxed up the last of my books, pulled the remaining dollars from what little was left in the shoebox, and took the graduation photo off my wall. The same wall they used to hang guilt on. Chloe watched from the porch. She didn't say a word. Not a taunt, not a goodbye. Just stood there in her oversized hoodie and glossy nails, arms crossed, lips tight. For a moment, I almost pitied her. Because no matter how much she won, no matter how many times she came out on top in our parents' twisted scoreboard, she would always be stuck there, grasping for power in a place that offered none. Lucas carried my last box to the car. My mom peeked through the blinds but didn't open the door. My dad wasn't even home. It didn't matter. They had no more power here. We moved into a small one-bedroom near the park, close enough to the library, far enough from my past. The walls were bare, the floor creaked, and the fridge made a soft wheezing noise when it ran. But I loved every inch of it, because it was mine. Ours. I got a raise at work. Not much, but enough to breathe a little easier. I started taking community college courses online, slowly, one class at a time, building toward something I hadn't dared dream about in years. One night, curled beside Lucas with a thunderstorm rolling outside, I asked, "Do you think people ever really heal from families like that?" He didn't answer right away. Then, "I think healing isn't about forgetting, it's about remembering without crumbling." I thought about that. "I don't want to be angry forever." "You won't," he said, "but being angry now, that's part of getting whole again." I squeezed his hand. "Thank you for everything." He kissed my forehead. "You did this, Emily." I just held the door open. Sometimes I still flinch when a door slams. Sometimes I still feel like I need to earn rest, prove peace. But those feelings don't run the show anymore. I run my life now. And I'm learning that love, real love, doesn't erase what's broken. It builds something strong around it. A few months after we moved in, I received a letter. It was from my mother. The handwriting on the envelope was neat. Careful. Too careful. Inside, a folded sheet. Just one line, written with more space than truth. "We always hoped you'd come back to us." No apology, no ownership, just that. I didn't respond. Not because I was bitter, but because I had already returned to the only home that mattered, myself. And I was never going back. If you were Emily, would you have confronted your family or walked away without a word? Tell me in the comments below. Where are you watching from? I want to know how far Emily's story is reaching. If this story hit close to home, hit the like button to let others know they're not alone. And if you believe healing is possible, even after betrayal, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Until next time, take care of your fire. It's what makes you unbreakable.